Great. Well, thank you everyone for attending. I'm going to talk a little bit about Info360 and a pilot project we've done for Dallas Water and how that has worked out. My name is Shawn Dent. Laura Cuvelet is another Carollo engineer who's done a lot of work with Dallas on this project. I'm a vice president and digital water technology lead for Carollo. I'm out of the Boston area. I've been doing modeling and other digital analytics for 32 years now, about 20 with Carollo. So when Innovise came out with this type of tool, I was very excited, and I've been working with them for several years on it. I just want to make clear too, I do not get paid by Innovise. So I am a consultant for Carollo, but we work hand in hand with Innovise because we use a lot of their products. So I'll talk a little bit about the Dallas Water project, give you an intro to Info360 and the way we've used it, show some examples of dashboards and features, then show the connection and how we've used it with Infowater. And then I'm going to hand it over to Greg Brazzo for next steps and where Innovise is looking to take Info360. So what do you need to know about Info360? Well, you know, there are a lot of great graphics. There's a lot of great technology out there to show what's happening in your system. But again, this is just another tool out there to use. What it does, though, it provides this bridging of a gap between SCADA data and between modeling. Looking back, I remember in around 1995, I wrote a paper about connecting SCADA to swim modeling. And it never came to fruition for me for a variety of reasons, but it's always been my dream to have this, you know, near real-time modeling or real-time modeling capabilities in the industry. And now it's happening. Info360 has a lot of capability of customization in it. So it also has a lot of analytics and statistical analysis available in it. So it's a lot more than just this, you know, connection between SCADA data, SCADA historian data, and your model. And I'm somewhat tongue-in-cheek, jokingly talking about modeling as a service now. As consultants, we work with a lot of utilities and municipalities and create these excellent models for them. But then we get to the point after a master plan where we either hand over the model, and some utilities, if they're lucky enough, have modelers on staff or a modeler on staff. A lot of times, though, it can die on the vine and not be updated, a lot like Innovise was showing you before there. But this really provides the capability of doing modeling as a service, and a big part of that is because of using the web, using cloud services, and using analytics that can be served over a dashboard, over a web browser. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through it. So when we first started looking at Info360 as Carollo Engineers, it was actually called Scada Watch way back when, and probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And I've been working with Innovise on that. And a big part of this was to see, all right, what is Scada Watch all about? How can it work? How can we set it up for clients? How useful is it going to be? Who will have to be involved in putting it together? And one of the things I came up with was, you know, this is a big part of event management and time reclamation for modelers and for the people that are using the information that's coming out of the model. So the typical process we go through is an event happens out in the field. And the client wants to know what's going on. So we have to identify what data is needed to look at this, extract that data from SCADA, format it to get it into the model, load the data into the model, analyze the event, hopefully identify the causes of what happened and respond to the client. That has to go through usually several departments, engineering, modeling, operations. It also can take some time. And if that event happened and it's not that big of a turnaround, it's more of a part of the planning process of looking out a year or two. Maybe it's not that big of a deal, that it would take a lot of time to analyze it. But a lot of these, you want to turn it around and find out what's going on to be able to react more quickly to what's happening in the field. So doing this kind of by hand and more of the manual process that we've done over the years can take weeks, if not months, depending on how big the model is, what has happened, what kind of monitoring is out there, and so on. But what we're obviously looking to do as an industry is reduce that way down and utilize the tools that we have now with the cloud and be able to really compress this down to less than a day and possibly even a couple of hours if the data from the Scada is connected right into the model in near real time. And I use near real time because this isn't meant to be the same as what you do with Scada. Scada is for operating. Scada, you're looking at things second by second. This is really to pull in data at a minute interval, 5-minute interval, and be able to use that data in the modeling process. So the Dallas system, Dallas hired Carollo to come in and do a master plan for their water system. And a big part of that was to develop a system-wide model. So Dallas is obviously a very big area, serves 2.3 million people, very large service area, 3 treatment plants, 5,000 miles of pipeline, and it goes on and on and on here. So it's a very large system, and they were looking at an all pipes model. Part of this overall project was to look at asset data and needs assessment, then look at alternatives evaluation, prioritization, optimization. What are some long-term strategies? And then finally, a capital improvement plan to be able to go out and do improvements throughout the system to take care of growth, take care of deterioration, all the things that we do master plan for. But there was the opportunity here to really make a much better model than what they had. They had an H2O map model that we took, put into Infowater, created an all pipes model, and having 265,000 pipe segments, it's a big model in Infowater. The one thing I want you to look at here is that pressure was calibrated to 270 locations. Keep that number in mind because that's what I'll be talking about in a little bit is how it relates to Info360. So again, the system here, we didn't want to do the whole system and try to connect Info360 at once. We wanted to take a pilot area. So we took an area in the north part of the system, as it shows up here, that had a lot of good assets that represented a lot of what we wanted to look at throughout the whole system. So what we did is we pulled out a piece of that calibrated model and recreated it, readjusted it, so it was just a small model, individual by itself. What we then did is looked at Info360 connect up to this as a pilot to show Dallas how Info360 could be used, what the advantages are to that. And as a pilot, it was relatively inexpensive, and then they could move to a much bigger program if they found it useful. So the real structure of Info360 is you have your Scada historian, and again, it's not the Scada system itself that you're tapping into. So there's not the security issues necessarily that you have to look into like you're tapping directly in. That's something that usually IT and operators and everyone else don't want to have any part of. And what Innovice has done, as was briefly discussed before, is they're looking to pull data out of there, push it up to their cloud and utilize it in that way. They're working off the AWS cloud, and that's a way, once you can move data up to the cloud and have the security already built in with AWS or Microsoft Azure or whatever, you've opened it up. You've opened up what we do as modeling and master planners here. And the idea is connecting in the hydraulic model, but a big part of this is having Info360 there. You're accessing it through a web interface. Anybody can go in and then start accessing this information. So you can look at a whole bunch of different things utilizing this software connected to the model, connected to the historian data. But ultimately, it opens it up to non-modelers. It lets you get information out as a modeler to engineering, to operations, to executive management, whoever wants to see it, without having to print maps out and go through that typical process. So it really streamlines this whole process. It's nothing new that we weren't doing before, but it very much compresses and streamlines that process. So this is a schematic of the configuration of how Info360 works. And basically, it's middleware. It's in between Infowater, it's in between GIS and your Scada historian, where the Scada historian is taking and storing time series data out there. That's being extracted. Also, it can be connected up to ArcGIS, like Infowater is connected to ArcGIS, but you can do ArcGIS online into Info360, and then you're connecting it to the Infowater model. So ultimately, you have this circle that's being developed here where you're going between Info360 and Infowater. And this Info360 also works with Innovize's other products, but this was specifically on the water side. The data flows for Info360 is really about bringing that historian time series database in. That can be extensive. If you have 1 minute data for 270 sensors that are going on and on and on for months, if not years, that's a lot of data to deal with. So this isn't just a product that takes care of time series data in a time series database. It also provides a lot more that you can do with that, but it very efficiently deals with the time series database, which is not necessarily an easy thing to do. We integrated ArcGIS Online when we were using this. You can bring in billing demand databases, like from AMI systems, pulling that in there, using DMAs potentially, and linked up with billing records to see about leaks and water balances within your system for non-revenue water. You can create custom reports, get alerts. We didn't really do a lot with those pieces, but we did a lot with the Infowater. And a big part of this too is being able to utilize Info360 as the mechanism, like most modelers use spreadsheets right now, or maybe even SQL databases, to process information both in and out, results and input to the model, to be able to set it up to run it at any time period that you choose. So it was a little bit different years ago in how Innovize set up Scada Watch to work, but a big jump forward with this was moving to a cloud-based structure here. So what we did, and this is obviously a Innovize graphic, but what we did is work with them to see, okay, now there's a three-phased approach here. We'll do phase 1 as a pilot, then we can move into phase 2 that really takes in the whole system. And then phase 3 is the live connection to Scada. Phase 3 is something that was kind of wrapped into the whole process before with Scada Watch, and that ran into different issues that I won't go into, but that could really affect how this is applied to a utility. So that was pulled out and done at the last part of this phasing. And a lot of that will hopefully just be using APIs or other exchange mechanisms to pull one way out of a Scada historian, put it up on AWS that Innovize is running, and really sidestep a lot of the problems that you would have with people getting bent on a shape about security and linking into a Scada system, and all the very good reasons why you don't want to do that. So some of the dashboards we put together here, a big part of this pilot was to show, hey, what can we do with it? What are the features here? what can we show you? And these are just two examples here. Time series data, again, is not necessarily an easy thing to manage. As modelers well know, you put too much into a spreadsheet and you'll practically kill it. It doesn't do great with time series graphing without a lot of help. This allows you to put these time series graphs together, stack them on each other, do analytics on it, and if you do have the connection in to near real time, you can have gauges, just like a Scada system. You can see the last 24 hours. You can do a lot with this to really replicate, you know, much closer to what the industry is now talking about as a digital twin. The workspaces or dashboards that Info360 allows for, you can create as many as you want here. It's kind of like tabs or workspaces or whatever, but you can manage this all over a web interface, give people different access to different parts of the database, let them create their own dashboards or keep the dashboards for them just to visualize things. You can create the dashboards, so maybe by parameters. So you want to look at flow across your system, that could be a dashboard. You might want to look at specific locations like pump stations. That could be a specific dashboard. There's a lot of different ways you can configure this, and it is a little bit of an art on how you want to do that to make it most useful to everyone that's using it. Again, another dashboard here where you can bring in both time series data to look at trending and then near real-time gauges to see what's happening with tank levels, pump run times, pressures, what pumps are on, what pumps are off. So it's really pulling together a lot of different data onto one screen or multiple screens. Again, another example of flows where, in this case, this was 5 different pump stations that came together into one. At the bottom, that's the total of all of this in MGD. Those are in GPM. But then you can start looking at this, and this is over about a week's period. So you can look historically at this very clearly and see what's happening within your system. And giving people that might not have that access to time series data a lot more interaction with what's happening throughout the system. The Info360 also works with ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Server. You can bring data in and put it over their base map that's kind of like a Google map. And you can have all of the sensor locations will be shown on that GIS map. So instead of having to go in like in a Scada system where you have to know the tag name potentially to get to where you want to go, it can be a little cryptic. Here you can go in, look at your system, jump right to the area that you're looking for, click on that live node within there and be able to see information about your system that can also take you into other screens for historic data or near real-time operations. The time series capabilities of it are pretty impressive. And what they allow you to do is put together these time series graphs. And if you can see on the upper left-hand part of the screen here, you can go in and select, you know, say you're bringing minute data in. Well, that's kind of your raw data. You may want to see it as 5-minute or 15-minute. You can go in and just click on the graph there and automatically change it to different time intervals, which is really useful to look at. That would typically be a very difficult thing normally using Excel, where you decide upon a time interval to use for your modeling, say 15-minute, take all your data and get it all at the 15-minute interval. If you wanted to look at it in other intervals, it would be a whole lot more work to do that. And now it's basically a click of a button to see that information, which can really help with analyzing the system at those different time intervals. There's a whole lot of statistical functions. There's a scripting language you can go in here and use. You know, I've only scratched the surface, but they've included a lot of really interesting things that are constantly being updated. So, and what I think Innovyze is trying to do too is develop some of this so it can be handed over to whoever uses Info360 to do common type things, looking at creating diurnal patterns, creating other information that you'd have to take running through a spreadsheet. The water balance module here is very useful if you're looking and you have enough sensors out in the system. That's a big part of it. This isn't going to, create a great water balance if you're monitoring only at a couple of pump stations. But what this shows just from a pilot system is you can collect in where those SCADA data is being collected. You can look at tank levels, and you can automatically create a water balance and see if you're losing non-revenue water. You can bring in billing records and really look more intensely at your system. You could even go one more level with DMAs and focus in very discrete locations in your system and get a lot more information in here. So this water balance is great to look at. Is it non-revenue water? Do you have a break? How much sensing do you have to do out in the field to get the information you want at the scale that you want? This can really help define that and improve on it as the years go by for your system. So the connection to Infowater is fairly straightforward. The graphic on the right is showing all of the different SCADA points that are being monitored, what the modeling elements are. You set this up in a spreadsheet, and Innovyze imports it, sets up what it's measuring, what the intervals are, what kind of units they are, what time periods are being used and brought in. And then in the Run Manager in Infowater, you just connect it up. You can use historical data to run or near real-time data to run. So once this gets configured, which it doesn't take a lot, it's that really nice system to be able to link it directly into your model, have all that historical data and or near real-time data right at your fingertips. So you're not playing an Excel, game exchange to get information into your system. So in this example here, you can go into Infowater and do some great stuff like Innovyze has shown you, or if you use the product. You can go in and look at what's modeled versus measured here. And this is for like a reservoir tank level. And that's all great, but the modeler can see all this on whenever they want, if they can get into and use the software, but most people can't. So we worked with Innovyze to say, hey, it's just as important to get that data out to a web browser so everybody else can see it. So that's that two-way connection now that wasn't previously available, but has become available, so that you can use Info360 as a dashboard mechanism just over Chrome as a web browser, and allow other people to access it, engineers, operators, management, so they can really see what's going on, and they can develop their own dashboards that are probably a lot simpler than what the modeler needs to see. But again, it's serving the right information to the right people at the right time. Here's just an example. You can have a lot of data on your screen, and you can put it in at different intervals, put the modeled and measured over. You can zoom in on it really easily. You can track what's happening throughout, every one of these points where you have measured and modeled data in both Info360 and Infowater, but this is specifically some of the interface with Info360. You can also look at analyses like pump analyses. Innovyze is doing even more to help modelers out and to help operators out and others out analyzing pumps throughout their systems. You can put in manufacturer's curves. You can see what's actually being recorded in the field. Are you off your curve? Have your impellers been really chewed up by sand or other things, and they're not even nearly where they should be from the manufacturer's curve? Then you can model it too and put modeling data into this and see where you're really working off your curve at different times for different flows, to start looking at efficiencies and what could be done to make the system run better. One of the questions I would get both internally and externally from clients is, all right, this looks great. This is a kind of a dashboarding software. We're using Power BI to do a bunch of stuff. Why would I want to go with Info360 versus a Power BI? Well, Power BI is great for what it does. It's a dashboard. It's fairly agnostic. You can do, you can bring in any kind of data you want. It's still a very useful thing, but you would need to really get in there and do some significant amount of programming to connect it to a hydraulic model. That's what Info360 is. That's why they developed it, because it's not an easy thing to just plug and play. There's nothing out there that's plug and play. And this is specifically not plug and play. It's taken Innovyze a lot of effort to make this happen. Connecting it to Scada is probably easier than connecting it to the model, depending on APIs and things like that. But again, you're using this as that middleware between the SCADA data and your modeling software. Power BI, really, to get it useful, you need a cloud database if you're sharing it across an organization or sharing it between different people on the project. So AWS is already being used by Innovyze to be that location of a database up in the cloud that can be used. So there's even ways that you use Info360, and potentially you could hook up a Power BI dashboard to integrate other data together. Some of it from Info360, some of it from CMMS or other things. And Innovyze is looking to pull Info360 together in a much broader umbrella, so that it works with all of their products, again, to be able to integrate asset management data and risk analysis into this with real-time data, and ultimately working towards this quote-unquote digital twin that the market keeps talking about here. So be careful. Don't try this at home. Don't try it at work either. You're going to run into the same things I've run into, and utilize a product when it's available out there if it's affordable and does what you want it to do. Doesn't replace Power BI. Power BI is still a great software product. Tableau is a great dashboarding product to use, but specifically for modeling and real-time data, Innovyze has done a very good job with it. So one of the next steps we're getting into now for Dallas is to look at the entire system. So as I said earlier, think of the 270 pressure monitoring points. For the pilot, we did 20. So we brought about a month or two worth of 1 minute data in, and that was consolidated to 5 minute, 15 minute, 30 minute, hourly, daily, weekly, monthly. And then we connected it to the model to show how it works in between. But now the next step is to take all of that data for 270 locations that we, I can tell you from our young modelers who help build the model and calibrate it that, dealing with an ungodly amount of spreadsheets to do this, we want to show that, look, you can get this information in and it can all be at one location in a very efficient database for time series data, and link this all together. And ultimately, down the road, this could be used to do that, on-demand calibration as things change throughout your system. Again, that's down the road, and there's the issues too of connecting up in phase 3 to different SCADA system historians, but we're really getting much closer to that point where this can all become modeling as a service over the web. So with that, thank you for your attention. I'm not sure if we want to do questions right now, but I'm handing it back over to Greg.
Yeah, you can hand it to Greg, Shawn. Thank you for that presentation. Really powerful stuff. It's really exciting to see, again, building the faith in the model, being able to do post-incident analyses or keeping the model up to date. All these things are really important. And thanks for the presentation on how you can maybe expedite some of that with Infowater and Info360. We did have one question, Shawn. Was phase 3 for this project using the SSIS package for automating output and inference of Scada historian data?
Phase 3 is the next step that we'll get into after we show Dallas how everything can be aggregated into Info 360 with our Infowater model. It's still something that I'm working with Innovise on, because as you know, there are a lot of different SCADA software out there, SCADA historians, but that part of the process will very much be driven by Innovise, by a client's SCADA and operations and IT people, and how they want that set up. So we'll be looking over the shoulder and making that happen as an owner's advisor to Dallas, but a lot of that data exchange is going to be in the hands of Innovise, working with both the client and working with SCADA HMI historian data to be able to push that out in a way that's safe for the municipality, safe for taking that data, putting it up on the cloud and protecting it and encrypting it. So that will be phase 3. So I haven't done that yet at the cloud level. When I did Scada Watch, we did that behind the firewall for a client, and that can take a while. It can take even longer to get the client to understand what you're trying to do, and you're not trying to allow access into a very SCADA system that only operators should be dealing with.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Thank you.